November 1st, 1942. The North African desert stretches like a vast ocean of ochre and gold under the scorching sun. You can almost feel the heat radiating off the sand, mixing with the dust kicked up by a convoy of German panzers crawling toward the distant ridge of El Alamein. The air is tense, metallic, heavy with anticipation. Somewhere behind the lines, Rommel, the desert fox, studies his maps with eyes as sharp as a hawk, convinced his bold gamble will cut the British defenses in half. But you don't see the unseen war raging behind the scenes. Inside a dimly lit room in Bletchley Park, England, rows of codebreakers hunched over typewriters and primitive electromechanical machines. They listen to the rhythmic clatter of keys and the occasional sigh of frustration. Among them is 22-year-old cryptanalyst Joan Clark, squinting at the tangled mess of letters that form the enemy's secrets. Somewhere in that tangle lies a message that could change everything. A German operator is unaware that the signal he believes is secure is already being monitored. His fingers hit the keys with routine precision, encoding a plan that Rommel himself thinks is invisible to the Allies. Every character typed, every phrase, carries the weight of thousands of men on both sides of the desert. And yet, here, hundreds of miles away, the Allies are reading it, line by line, unraveling his intentions. The message is brief but devastatingly clear. Rommel intends to launch a massive offensive against El Alamein in the coming days, concentrating his armored divisions and mechanized infantry to punch through the British line. If unchecked, the Axis forces could split the Eighth Army, crush Montgomery's defenses, and potentially roll across Egypt toward Alexandria. Montgomery doesn't yet know this. Not fully. But at this moment, somewhere in his command tent, he feels a nagging unease. The desert whispers of incoming storms, both meteorological and military. The codebreaker's discovery hasn't yet reached him, but the tension is already building like a spring coiled tight with anticipation. And then the coded message arrives in his hands. The words are blunt, unambiguous like a slap across the face. Montgomery reads, rereads, and lets out a slow, controlled exhale. The British lines must be reinforced, positions fortified, artillery emplacements recalculated. Every officer in his command is summoned to act, and every soldier on the front line becomes part of a living chessboard. Rommel, confident in his audacity, believes he has the advantage. But little does he know, the invisible hand of intelligence has already moved the pieces. Every tank he commands, every supply convoy he sends into the desert is being anticipated. And somewhere deep in his mind, a flicker of doubt begins to form, though he cannot yet see the full picture. The desert sun beats down mercilessly, and the wind carries the faint smell of oil, sweat, and gunpowder. Somewhere ahead, the Axis columns are gathering. You can almost hear the low rumble of engines, the clanking of metal on sand. And in Bletchley Park, the young cryptanalysts hold their breath. They know the weight of the secret in their hands. But the real question lingers. Can one message, intercepted in secrecy, really decide the fate of a campaign that has already cost thousands of lives? November 2nd, 1942. The morning sun casts long shadows across the scrubby desert floor of El Alamein. You can almost taste the grit in the air, sharp and dry, as if the sand itself is holding its breath. British soldiers move like ants along the ridges, digging trenches, assembling artillery, and stringing barbed wire that will soon form a lethal lattice. The sound of shovels striking rock-hard earth mixes with the distant rumble of approaching German engines, a prelude to the storm. Montgomery walks along the forward lines, his boots crunching over the sand. His sharp blue eyes scan the horizon, calculating, measuring. He stops at each emplacement, speaking with officers in clipped tones that leave no room for error. "Double the anti-tank guns here," he commands. "Shift the artillery to cover the northern ridge. Every position must have overlapping fields of fire." You can almost feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Thousands of men's lives hinge on every adjustment. Meanwhile, in the shadowed corridors of the 8th Army's command tent, maps are spread out under flickering lantern light. Signals officers relay the decrypted message again and again, each word ringing in the ears of the planners. Rommel's offensive plan, his audacious concentration of armor and mechanized infantry, lays bare the vulnerability of the British positions. Montgomery's team works frantically, moving reserves into place, rerouting supply trucks, and rehearsing counterattacks that will strike at the heart of the enemy's advance. You can almost hear the silent conversation between commanders and codebreakers, a dialogue across miles and mediums, a war fought with intellect as much as with steel. Each reinforcement, each artillery battery moved, is a direct response to the intelligence that flowed unseen, yet decisive. Soldiers in the front lines sense the shift too. More bunkers, more anti-tank obstacles, more machine gun nests suddenly springing up where there had been none yesterday. Rommel, unaware of the interception, begins his final preparations. His panzer divisions roll out under the desert sun, their engines echoing like thunder across the sands. He reviews his maps, confident in the secrecy of his operation, picturing the collapse of British lines as the desert fox strikes swiftly and decisively. But somewhere in the labyrinth of sand dunes, an invisible hand has already rewritten his script. Every maneuver he plans has already been anticipated. The tension is palpable. You can almost feel the shifting winds of fate. Montgomery's fortifications will turn what Rommel sees as a moment of glory into a deadly trap. And as the Axis columns gather, a chilling thought begins to creep into Rommel's mind, a doubt he cannot yet define. Something is off, something he cannot see. The desert waits silently. The sun climbs higher, bathing the fortifications in harsh light. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of tanks and trucks grows louder. The first clash of what will become one of the pivotal moments of the North African campaign is imminent. And in this stillness, the question hangs in the air. Will Rommel realize too late that his every move has already been anticipated? November 3, 1942. Dawn breaks over the desert, pale and fragile, spilling light across a battlefield tense with expectation. The wind carries the metallic tang of machinery and the faint scent of oil and sweat. On the horizon, the rumble of German panzers grows louder, a rolling tide of steel and dust. You can almost feel the ground tremble beneath the weight of hundreds of tanks and trucks, advancing relentlessly toward the British positions. Rommel rides at the head of his forces, a tall, wiry figure in a weathered field coat, eyes scanning the terrain for weaknesses he believes still exist. His confidence is tempered only by the harsh desert itself, but not by the invisible shadow looming over his every move. In his mind, this is the moment he seizes victory, the decisive strike that will crush Montgomery's 8th Army and open the way to Alexandria. But as the German columns surge forward, British artillery bursts to life with a precision that seems almost preternatural. Every gun emplacement, every anti-tank mine, every machine gun nest has been positioned according to the intercepted message. The Axis forces charge headlong into a meticulously prepared killing zone. Tanks grind to a halt against obstacles they did not anticipate. Commanders scramble to redirect armored units under relentless fire. Chaos spreads like wildfire through Rommel's carefully planned formations. Montgomery, calm and methodical, watches from his command post. Maps, reports, and radio signals flow across the table in a continuous stream. Every counterattack, every reinforcement he dispatches, strikes exactly where Rommel's plan predicted there would be gaps. The 8th Army moves like a single organism, anticipating, responding, adapting. It's as if Montgomery can see into the desert fox's mind and guide his men around every trap Rommel laid. The clash intensifies. Explosions shatter the desert's morning stillness, sending clouds of smoke and sand twisting into the sky. The panzers advance, but each step is measured by the British, who have already read the enemy's intentions. Tank crews feel the sudden resistance, the devastating precision of fire that seems to come from nowhere. You can almost hear the disbelief in their voices as the advance stalls, as every calculated move turns into a desperate struggle for survival. Rommel's audacity, which he relied upon so heavily, begins to betray him. The very boldness that he believed would overwhelm Montgomery now leaves his forces exposed. He rides along the front, urging units forward, but the rhythm of the battle is no longer his to command. Somewhere deep in his mind, a flicker of understanding begins. The British knew. The enemy anticipated every move. By mid-morning, the tide of the Desert War has shifted. What was meant to be a swift, crushing offensive has become a grinding, costly fight for every dune and ridgeline. Rommel's men fight bravely, but even their courage cannot compensate for the invisible hand guiding the British. Every attack is met, every maneuver countered, every advantage nullified. And as the sun climbs higher, burning away the early morning mist, the desert stretches endlessly around a scene of chaos and precision, a testament to foresight, intellect, and the power of a single intercepted message. But the question lingers: can Rommel recover, or has the desert itself conspired with unseen forces to seal the fate of his last gamble? November 4th, 1942. The sun hangs high over the desert, relentless, casting long shadows over twisted metal and churned sand. Smoke from burning tanks curls into the sky, mingling with the heat waves that shimmer like a mirage. Rommel rides along the battered front lines, eyes narrowed, scanning the battlefield that was supposed to be his masterpiece. But the lines are holding. The British defenses, reinforced, reorganized, and anticipating every thrust, stand unbroken. You can almost feel the weight pressing down on him. The Desert Fox, the commander who had outmaneuvered enemies from Tobruk to Gazala, now feels a rare, gnawing uncertainty. Reports reach him, fragmentary at first, of failed assaults and unexpected losses. Tank battalions meant to punch through the center have stalled. Artillery units report being cut off or ambushed. The calculations he made with such precision now seem like illusions. For the first time, Rommel senses the invisible force shaping the battlefield. His intelligence officers scramble to find explanations, whether reconnaissance errors, even sabotage. But deep down, he knows the truth. Someone had read his plans. Someone had known. Every advantage he relied upon was anticipated. Every gap he expected to exploit sealed before his tanks ever reached it. In a quiet moment, away from the guns and chaos, he reviews his maps again, tracing the routes his divisions had taken. Each line, each arrow now feels like a trap he never saw coming. His confidence falters. The audacious gamble he had counted on, the speed, the surprise, the Desert Fox's legendary intuition, has been turned against him. Montgomery, calm and methodical, has orchestrated a counter that transforms Rommel's brilliance into vulnerability. You can almost hear the whisper of the desert, dry and sharp, carrying a cruel truth. Even the boldest plans can be undone by intellect hidden in shadows. For Rommel, the realization is devastating. The British had intercepted the message. Bletchley Park's codebreakers had outmaneuvered him, turning secrecy into exposure, audacity into peril. And yet the battle continues. Men fight with courage, engines roar and shells explode, but Rommel's mind races. How had the enemy known? How could a single message, captured far from the battlefield, dictate the outcome of an entire campaign? The Desert Fox, usually so unflappable, feels the sting of helplessness, a rare and bitter taste. The desert stretches endlessly, indifferent as both armies clash. But in Rommel's mind, the seed of dread has taken root. A final, fateful question burns through him. Has his last offensive been doomed from the start? November 5th, 1942. The desert sun scorches everything in its path, turning the sand into a blinding sea of gold and white. You can almost hear the whine of artillery shells cutting across the sky and the rumble of tanks straining over the dunes. The British Eighth Army, calm and precise, begins the counterattack, a symphony of coordination built entirely on knowledge Rommel could never suspect. Montgomery moves among his commanders, a composed figure amid the chaos. Reports flood in, armored divisions striking exactly where Rommel thought he had the advantage, artillery barrages hitting enemy assembly points before they can even form, infantry maneuvering through gaps Rommel assumed were secure. Every action is the perfect response, executed with timing that seems almost prescient. The Desert Fox's bold offensive is crumbling under a strategy he never saw coming. In the heart of the battle, British Matilda tanks roll forward, their thick armor shrugging off the hits that would have devastated lighter German panzers. Anti-tank guns unleash volleys at approaching columns, puncturing tires and tracks, slowing the advance to a crawl. Engineers dismantle obstacles as quickly as the Germans attempt to overcome them, turning Rommel's carefully planned breakthroughs into deadly dead ends. The desert itself becomes an accomplice to Montgomery's plan, every ridge and dune leveraged to maximum effect. You can almost feel the disbelief among German commanders. Units are cut off, supply lines severed, communications disrupted. Rommel watches from a command post, eyes scanning the chaos jaw tight as reports continue to pile in. His audacious gamble, the offensive he believed would decide North Africa, has turned into a desperate struggle for survival. The Eighth Army's disciplined counterattack, powered by intelligence he never suspected existed, is relentless. By late afternoon, the first cracks appear in the German lines. Soldiers fall back under concentrated fire, tanks are abandoned in the sand. Montgomery's forces press forward, systematically reclaiming positions the Axis hoped to capture. The message intercepted hundreds of miles away has transformed the battlefield. What Rommel thought would be his moment of glory is now a lesson in the power of information, timing, and meticulous preparation. The desert grows quiet again, but not in peace. Smoke rises from wrecked vehicles, and the moans of the wounded remind everyone that victory comes at a cost. Rommel, riding along the rear, finally comprehends the depth of his miscalculation. The unseen hand of intelligence has not only anticipated his moves, it has dictated the outcome of his last great gamble. And as the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the battlefield, one undeniable truth emerges. In war, knowledge can be as lethal as any gun, as decisive as any tank. Rommel's last offensive has failed, and the sands of Alamein bear witness to a turning point orchestrated not by audacity alone, but by secrets uncovered in silence. The question lingers: could a single intercepted message truly change the fate of a desert campaign, sealing the Desert Fox's legacy in ways even he could not foresee? November 6, 1942. The desert stretches endlessly, quiet now except for the faint crackle of fires and the distant murmur of retreating engines. The once proud German columns are scattered, their armor abandoned, their men exhausted and demoralized. You can almost feel the weight of defeat in the air, thick like the dust that clings to uniforms and hair. Rommel rides along the remnants of his forces, the Desert Fox diminished not by brute force, but by the invisible hand of intelligence. Montgomery, surveying the battlefield from a forward ridge, allows himself a rare, private smile. The Eighth Army has held Alamein, and the counterattack has turned the tide in North Africa. Soldiers cheer quietly, battered but alive, their exhaustion outweighed by the realization that they have survived and prevailed. Every fortification, every carefully placed gun, every reserve maneuver executed in anticipation of Rommel's strike has paid off. The desert has witnessed the triumph of strategy, foresight, and the quiet power of secrets. Back in England, Bletchley Park hums with unassuming triumph. Cryptanalysts, mostly young men and women, type out reports, their work almost invisible to the world. Yet it was their tireless hours, their ability to unravel the enemy's codes, that changed the course of this battle. Joan Clark and her colleagues have not just intercepted a message, they have altered history. A single document, captured in secrecy, became a decisive weapon more powerful than any tank or artillery shell. Rommel, meanwhile, retreats to regroup, his mind racing. The audacity that once defined his command now feels brittle. He understands, finally, the scale of what intelligence can achieve, how knowledge, hidden and silent, can anticipate even the most brilliant maneuvers. The Desert Fox's legend survives, but so does the lesson. No amount of cunning or daring can overcome an unseen adversary who sees all. You can almost imagine the ripple effects. Alamein becomes a symbol not just of military might, but of the quiet battles fought in shadows. The intercepted messages, the codebreakers' genius, the calculated patience of Montgomery's command. The Axis gamble, once so full of promise, has been undone by foresight and intellect, leaving a desert forever marked by a clash of strategies, courage, and secrecy. And as the sun sets over the endless dunes, painting the sand in streaks of blood red and gold, one truth is undeniable. Wars are not always won on the battlefield alone. Sometimes, a single message, carried across invisible lines, can decide the fate of thousands, and even a desert fox can be undone by the silent brilliance of those who fight in the shadows.